Greetings, and welcome to the 12th edition of the Partnership Seminar between the Republic of Korea, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, or SAARC. My name is Soo-Hyun Lee, a visiting scholar fellow at the Seoul National University Asia Center, and I will be moderating the first half of this seminar. The theme for this year's Partnership Seminar is A Way Forward for Korea-SAARC Cooperation on Climate Change. We are joined today by a most respectable list of national and international civil servants, academics, and experts. So to start off this year's Partnership Seminar, Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of South Korea, Ms. Seo Min-jung, will deliver the opening address.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me first extend a warm welcome to everyone who have carved time out of their busy days to join us here today. I would also like to thank Seoul National University Asia Center for their excellent work in co-organizing this seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, South Asia is a geopolitically important sub-region that bridges the Middle East and the Indian Ocean. It houses almost 1/4 of the global population, which is a massive labor force. It is also one of the fastest growing economies in the world, with almost 7% growth rate during the past few years before the pandemic. Noting this huge potential of the South Asian region, the Republic of Korea gained observer status to SAARC in 2006 in an effort to strengthen its relationship with the South Asian countries and began the ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar in light of such efforts. The seminar has been held annually since 2010 to enhance mutual understanding and facilitate discussions on future cooperation between the two sides. Over the years, we had in-depth discussions on cooperation ideas on various fields such as energy, public health, economic connectivity, and investment. Today, at the 12th ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar, we would like to focus on the issue of climate change. Last year, the unprecedented global pandemic changed our lives completely. Without their usual vigor and energy, empty streets in our towns seemed as though time has come to a stop. On the contrary, the clock continued to tick for climate change. World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, has warned that the past 7 years were the warmest on record. However, we did not need science or numbers to personally feel the impacts of climate change around the world. Extreme weather events such as heat waves, droughts, wildfires, excessive rainfalls, floods, and cyclones are constantly posing a grave threat to our health, our supply of fresh drinking water and food, and our homes. These threats know no borders. However, there are regions particularly more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change due to the specific characteristics of the region. South Asia is one of such places. Densely populated cities in low-lying coastal areas are directly exposed to the rising sea levels. The accelerated melting of the Himalayan glaciers bring the risk of flooding or potential loss of the source of fresh water in the low-lying areas. Also, in regions where agriculture and forestry are the main sources of income, damages caused by droughts and floods lead to significant economic losses. Ladies and gentlemen, all such concerns are telling us that we cannot afford to hesitate and that we must act immediately with a sense of urgency. Nevertheless, changing our long-standing socio-economic structure and way of living is easier said than done. However, we must remember that together we become more powerful. As the saying goes, a single stick can break easily, but a bundle of sticks is hard to break. Cooperation brings synergy. To harness such synergy, we must communicate as much as possible. Through communication, we can first strengthen our capability to adapt to climate change in such areas as weather prediction, water management, and public health. And secondly, identify concrete ways to cooperate in introducing innovative technologies and policies that will contribute to carbon reduction while creating economic opportunities at the same time. I hope that today's seminar serves as particularly precious opportunity to share our experiences and knowledges and the common problem that global community as a whole is facing and identify ways of cooperation that would be of practical help. I'd like to extend my gratitude once again to the distinguished guests who have joined us today, both online and offline. Normally, we would invite guests from the SAARC countries to Seoul to have more in-depth talks, but the COVID-19 situation did not allow it this year and last year. I sincerely hope that the situation gets better soon so that we can all meet in person. Thank you so much.
Next, we shall watch a congratulatory message by the director of the Seoul National University Asia Center, Mr. Park Soo-jin.
Your Excellency, Seo Min-jung, the Deputy Director General, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea. Your Excellency, Adnan Aliani, Officer in Charge, UN ESCAP Sub-Regional Office for South and Southwest Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. My name is Soo-jin Park, the Director of Asia Center, Seoul National University. It is a great honor for me to take part in the 12th Korea and SAARC Partnership Seminar. First of all, I would like to express my sincere apology for not being able to attend the meeting in person. Unfortunately, I have to stay in my office due to some other duties. The title of today's seminar is A Way Forward for the Korea-SAARC Cooperation on Climate Change. As an environmental scientist by training, I sincerely believe that the title and the objectives of today's meeting is most timely. In its 2021 report, the United Nations Framework on Climate Change raised a red alert for warning extreme weather events induced by climate change in the near future. The difficulty of humanity's mission to reach the emission reduction target to meet the Paris Agreement. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic has increased dependencies on fossil fuels, bringing the climate crisis closer than ever. The need for cooperation has been so dire. The Asian and Pacific Affairs Bureau of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea has been organizing the ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar annually since 2010 to enhance mutual understanding and facilitate discussions on future cooperation. As a leading research institute in Asia, Seoul National University Asia Center is co-hosting this seminar with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The theme for this year's seminar focuses on climate change cooperation. The clear divide between the developing and developed world was made clear during the COP26 in Glasgow. The result of COP26 was driven by politics rather than led by the logic of science and necessity, making effective cooperation more crucial. Amid the increasing sense of emergency about the climate crisis and call for global action being raised around the world, the seminar will play a key role in shaping out the future cooperation between Korea and SAARC on climate change mitigation and adaptation. While South Korea, like any other nation, has a long way to go and much to learn when it comes to sustainable transition, Korea also has much to share in terms of its accomplishment. The Korea Green New Deal takes ambitious steps towards carbon neutrality, job creation, and research and development in technology, financed through public and private investment totaling $144 billion. This seminar brings together policymakers and experts from SAARC and South Korea to explore challenges and opportunities to climate change response. It will ultimately offer opportunities to enhance understanding current response to climate change in South Asia and potential area for future collaboration. I hope today's event will lead to a successful hosting of the 12th ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar. Without a doubt, our shared commitment to climate change mitigation and adaptation remains as strong as ever. I look forward to the outcome of your deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your statement. So next, we have the honor of welcoming our keynote speaker, Mr. Adnan H. Aliani, Director of the Strategy and Program Management Division and the Officer in charge of the Sub-Regional Office for South and Southwest Asia at the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. So, Ms. Rani?
Ms. Min Jong-seo, the Deputy Director General, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Korea, Mr. Soo-jin Park, the Director, Seoul National University Asia Center, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to deliver the keynote address at this important event on climate change cooperation in South Asia. This event is particularly relevant as it allows us the opportunity to take stock of the outcomes of COP26 from the perspective of South Asia. The issue of climate change in South Asia must be seen in the context of achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Despite high rates of economic growth in the past decade, South Asia accounts for 34% of people living in extreme poverty in the world. Globally, it also accounted for 37% of undernourished and almost 39% of under 5 stunted children. Deprivations that will likely lead to perpetuate intergenerational poverty. With persistent development challenges, including extensive infrastructure gaps, pervasive informality, lack of decent work opportunities, and low rates of female labor participation, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable development remains the paramount goal in South Asia. Historically, South Asia's contributions to greenhouse gases has been low. Even now, per capita greenhouse gas emissions from the sub-region are 2 to 6 times lower than Northeast Asia, Europe, and North America. As a sub-region, it contributes around 7% of global greenhouse gases at present. But with the expected rapid economic growth and reliance on fossil fuels, the region's share is expected to increase rapidly. Some studies suggest that greenhouse gas emissions from the sub-region will increase by about 25% by 2030 when compared to 2019 levels. Common but differentiated responsibility is therefore particularly relevant for South Asia. Despite historically low contributions to greenhouse gases and the present low per capita contributions, all South Asian countries have submitted their nationally determined contributions, with Bhutan and Nepal submitting a second NDC. At COP26, all South Asian countries made commitments to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Sri Lanka, for example, made a commitment to ensure that renewable energy comprises 75% of its energy mix by 2030. Yet despite these commendable actions, South Asia can and must do more. This is because with climate change, the frequency and intensity of both rapid and slow onset disasters will increase, and South Asia is particularly vulnerable to such disasters. Already, Asia and the Pacific suffers the most from natural disasters. Since 1970, Asia and the Pacific accounted for 57% of global fatalities from disasters, more than 2 million lives, or 1 life lost every 13 minutes. Among all the 5 sub-regions of Asia and the Pacific, South Asia has been the most impacted by disasters. The sub-region alone accounted for 44% of all fatalities and almost 50% of the total population affected by disasters. Climate change has resulted in severe economic losses as well, particularly for the smaller economies of the region. Cyclone Sidr, for example, resulted in damages and losses that shaved off 2.6% from Bangladesh's GDP in 2007. Climate-induced disaster risks are expected to be severe and wide-ranging in South Asia. Some of these risks include erratic rainfall patterns, increased precipitation, and droughts, increased glacial melts, landslides, and flash floods, particularly in the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush Mountains, seawater intrusion, increased risk of cyclones and tropical storms, increased heat waves, particularly in arid and semi-arid regions. Many of these impacts will be in South Asia's cities and towns. Given that most of the sub-region's mega and large cities are on the coast or along rivers, they are particularly vulnerable to floods and tidal surges. It is ironic that the greatest adverse impact of climate change will be felt by the poor, who contribute the least to it. Amongst the poor, it is the women, the children, the older persons, and the persons with disabilities that are particularly vulnerable to disasters. ESCAP's analysis shows that in the worst case climate change scenario, the number of people at risk of disasters will increase by around 1/3 in areas with low and medium scores in the Human Development Index. While the situation is dire, I believe that we are still in time to act decisively and prevent the worst case scenarios from becoming a reality. However, doing this will not be easy. We will require a whole of society approach, building alliances amongst governments, the private sector, research institutes, as well as with civil society organizations and community networks. Countries would need to design and implement robust low-emission development strategies that include developing green post-COVID recovery plans that are aligned with climate-related commitments, creating market mechanisms and policies such as putting a price on carbon and applying carbon pricing instruments to generate revenues and creating the fiscal space to support a shift towards low carbon and renewable energy, freezing the expansion of coal-based capacities and phasing down existing capacities in defined timeframes, developing viable financial plans to attract investments to support the implementation of greenhouse gas emission reduction actions. In addition to mitigation measures, countries need to design and implement socially inclusive climate change adaptation strategies. They would need to capitalize on frontier technologies to develop complex and cascading risk scenarios and resilience strategies that identify vulnerable areas and address the needs of vulnerable populations at the national, subnational, and local levels. Investments would be needed to increase the resilience of critical infrastructure such as road and rail transport, hospitals, and schools. Resilient logistics and supply chains would need to be developed to manage critical goods and deliver equipment. The use of new technologies would need to be combined with enhanced social organization and community mobilization, particularly amongst at-risk communities such as urban slums and squatter settlements. Such mobilization should seek to connect people with robust and resilient governmental and non-governmental social protection and health systems, which can go a long way to mitigate the impact of disasters. Investing in disaster resilience is far more economical than expenditures on disaster recovery. In Asia and the Pacific, the expenditure on disaster resilience and adaptation amounts to just 20% of annual disaster losses as compared to the hazard risks under a no-action scenario. Governments will need to have the political will to design and implement forward-looking fiscal measures that diversify their sources of finance and explore financial instruments such as wider application of insurance and reinsurance schemes, climate resilience bonds, and debt for resilience swaps. At the same time, countries of the sub-region would need to work with other developing countries to continue advocating that developed countries operationalize their pledge to provide the $100 billion per year to help developing countries adapt to climate change. Finally, in addition to national policies, countries will also need to scale up sub-regional and regional cooperation because disaster risks know no borders. There is a need for countries to get together to develop a regional strategy or framework on disaster, climate, and health resilience to allow countries to coordinate and exchange experience and take concerted actions. ESCAP stands ready to support its members and associate members to combat climate change. ESCAP, in partnership with SAARC and ROK, can offer platforms for experience sharing, develop knowledge products, and provide technical assistance and capacity development support to policymakers and stakeholders in both climate change mitigation and adaptation. Ladies and gentlemen, the road ahead in addressing the challenge of climate change will be long and arduous, but the alternative will lead to far more costly and painful consequences for our children and their children. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a successful meeting ahead.
Thank you for that excellent keynote, Mr. Aliani. Now, before beginning session one, we will take this opportunity to take a commemorative photograph. While we do this, the online audience, please be patient, and everyone else, please follow the instructions of the staff. Thank you. So we will now begin session one of the 12th ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar. In this opening session, we will be discussing both the impacts of and responses to climate change in the SAARC region. We are fortunate to have an impressive lineup of authorities from different SAARC member states joining us in this panel to explain the climate challenges that they are facing and how each state is responding to those challenges. As for the schedule, session one is split into two parts, as you will see in the schedule. The first half will host 3 speakers, which will be followed by a Q&A session and a coffee break. The second half will then host the remaining 3 delegates. That being said, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Amnul Islam Khan, a senior member of the Bangladesh Foreign Service and director for SAARC and the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, Relations at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Khan has technical training in civil engineering and has served in the state's diplomatic corps in Kenya, Iraq, and Jordan. Mr. Khan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you all. It is my pleasure and privilege to participate in the 12th ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar 2021. Before I commence my deliberations, I wish to express my thanks and appreciation towards the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Korea, and the Asia Center, Seoul National University for giving me this opportunity for participating in this year's seminar. Undoubtedly, the theme of this year's seminar, A Way Forward for the Korea-SAARC Cooperation on Climate Change, is a very timely and pragmatic topic for giving due cognizance at present time. It is my firm conviction that through the renderings of the year's seminar, a new era of cooperation will usher in between the people and government of ROK and the people and governments of the SAARC member states. Distinguished participants, today I'm going to present a paper on climate change in the SAARC region, impacts and current responses in Bangladesh's perspectives. Climate change is an issue that many have called the greatest development challenge of our generation. Recently, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reported the following handicap of climate change effect on our planet. Number one, devastating climate impacts to become obvious before a child born today turns 30. Number two, by 2050, 410 million more city dwellers to face severe water scarcity. Number three, up to 80 million more risk hunger by 2050. 420 million more will be exposed to extreme and potentially lethal heat waves. South Asia is a region where the global responsibility for addressing climate change has to be particularly stressed. It is where one can clearly make a case for how countries that have contributed relatively so little to the causes driving climate change stand to lose so much from its adverse effects. Climate change in Bangladesh is a critical issue as the country is one of the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. In the 2020 edition of German Watch's Climate Risk Index, it ranked 7th in the list of countries most affected by climate calamities during the period 1999 to 2018. The 2014 Climate Change Vulnerability Index ranked Bangladesh as the #1 economy at risk from climate change. And for Bangladesh, in the last 20 years, the economic losses associated to climate-related disasters account for an average of $2.4 billion a year, around 0.64% of GDP of Bangladesh. Distinguished participants, what happens in South Asia will clearly have a profound effect in the world, since the countries of the region are growing rapidly and are extremely vulnerable to climate impacts. If we cannot successfully meet the climate challenges here, then there is little chance that the world will be successful either. Thankfully, Asia has not been in the idle, and South Asia in particular is emerging as a global leader in aggressively responding to climate change. Throughout the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC member countries have committed to a shared set of priorities in addressing climate change, including ambitious targets for clean energy and low carbon technology development, as well as commitments to improve resilience of communities and economies. Efforts to secure adequate water, food supplies are of critical importance. All countries in South Asia are also working to address climate change at the national level. Distinguished participants, in Bangladesh, natural hazards come from increased rainfall, rising sea levels, and tropical cyclones are expected to increase as the climate changes, each seriously affecting agriculture, water, and food security, human health, and shelter. Sea levels in Bangladesh are predicted to rise by up to 0.3 meters by 2050, resulting in the displacement of 0.9 million people and by up to 0.71 meters by 2100, resulting in the displacement of 2.1 million people. To address the sea level rising threat in Bangladesh, the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100 was launched in 2018. Distinguished participants, the government of Bangladesh is working on a range of specific climate change adaptation strategies. Bangladesh is therefore adopting a two-fold strategy to tackling climate change. The main focus of Bangladesh's activities is on increasing resilience to the impact of climate change. At the same time, the country is also working to achieve lower greenhouse gas emissions. This balanced approach is reflected in its nationally determined contributions submitted to the UNFCCC in September 2015, which committed to reduce GHG emissions in the power industry and transport sectors by 5% below business as usual GHG emissions by 2030 unilaterally and up to 15% below business as usual GHG emissions by 2030 if sufficient and appropriate support is received from developed countries. Distinguished participants, as a leading advocate of climate action and the chairman of Climate Vulnerable Forum, Bangladesh has been vocal in urging the international community to act promptly to the imminent threat caused by climate change. Bangladesh hosts the Regional Office of Global Center on Adaptation. The government of Bangladesh instituted climate change cells in 2004 in climate-relevant ministries and line agencies to mainstream climate change issues in development activities. A climate change unit was established in the Ministry of Environment and Forest in 2010 to facilitate and coordinate with CCCs and manage climate change funds. The National Adaptation Program of Action was completed in 2005 and further updated in 2009. In 2008, the government adopted the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, focusing on 6 priorities. Number 1, food security, social protection and health. Number 2, comprehensive disaster management. Number 3, infrastructure development. Number 4, research and knowledge management. Number 5, mitigation and low carbon development. And number 6, capacity building and institutional strengthening. Bangladesh has also introduced several extreme weather-tolerant crop varieties, including rice and wheat, to prevent gradual agricultural production loss. Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund, with an allocation of $100 million for fiscal year 2000-2010, and another $100 million for fiscal year 2010-2011, which up to date has reached $420 million. And the Bangladesh Climate Change Resilience Fund, with commitments of £60 million from the United Kingdom, €8.5 million from European Union, and 10 million Danish kroner from Denmark, have also been set up. Supported by ADB, World Bank, and the International Finance Corporation, Bangladesh is preparing a strategic program for climate resilience under the pilot program for climate resilience of the Climate Investment Funds, which, in line with BCC SAP, will fortify embankments, rise coastal greenbelt, improve drainage, connectivity, and water resource management, promote climate resilience agriculture and food security, and ensure that drinking water is safe in vulnerable coastal communities. Distinguished participants, at the global level, Bangladesh attaches high importance to remain engaged in the global negotiations on climate change. Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, attended the COP25 in Madrid in December 2019, and this year, November, Glasgow, COP26. Bangladesh had taken up climate chairmanship of Climate Vulnerable Forum from 2020. The process of establishing regional climate change adaptation center in Bangladesh under Global Commission on Adaptation is underway. Climate change as a development challenge, also as a security concern, remains one of the most discussed topics in UN headquarters in New York. Permanent mission of Bangladesh to the UN has been proactively engage on climate change environment issues and highlights its vulnerabilities to the climate change. Distinguished participants, at the end, I would like to propose some potential areas of collaboration between Korea and SAARC for better preparation or fight against climate change. Number one, creating a SAARC South Korea Climate Fund. Number two, transfer of existing technology for combating climate change between SAARC and South Korea for mitigation and adapting the adverse effect of climate change. Sharing best practices between SAARC and South Korea in controlling the adverse effects of climate change. Number four, establishment of a SAARC South Korea Climate Change Data Bank, Awareness and Training Center for Climate-related issues. Number five, forming a SAARC South Korea Center to promote innovative and new techniques to counter ill effects of climate change. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Khan, for your presentation. Next, we have Mr. Karma S. Soshar, Chief of the Department of Regional Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bhutan. Mr. Soshar comes from an extensive background in civil service, having served as Deputy Permanent Representative for his country to the United Nations, Consul General to the United States, and between 2014 and 2017, leading the Division of Social and Humanitarian Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Soshar, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Her Excellency Ms. So Min-jong, Deputy Director General, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Park So-jin, National Seoul University Asia Center, Mr. Adnan Eliana of UNSK, and distinguished participants, very good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. At the outset, I wish to thank the Government of the Republic of Korea in collaboration with the Seoul University Asia Center for organizing this annual Korea-SAARC Partnership Seminar on Climate Change. I had the opportunity to attend the same event in 2012. This event is taking place at a very opportune moment. That's right after the conclusion of the COP26 of UNFCCC in Glasgow. To put things in perspective, let me first touch briefly on the country profile of Bhutan, and then I'll also touch on Bhutan's current vulnerability to climate change and some national institutional arrangement that we put in place to combat climate change, and the benefits of the cooperation between among the SAARC member states and with the Republic of Korea. As you may be all aware that Bhutan is a very small country with a total area of a little over 38,000 square kilometers, and with a population of less than around 735,000 population, and it's mostly a mountainous country, and of which Bhutan is covered with. The total area of the forest coverage in Bhutan is about little over 72%, and of which the total area, around 51% of the total area is under national park, biological corridors, wildlife sanctuaries. And Bhutan's main economy is hydropower and agriculture. As you know, as I already mentioned, Bhutan is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change and its impact. As it's highly dependent on climate-sensitive sectors like agriculture and hydropower, as I mentioned. As I said, 70% of Bhutan's population is dependent on subsistence agriculture. Due to climate change, there is an increased risk of disasters in Bhutan, particularly the glacial lake outburst floods, droughts, forest fire, landslides, and windstorms. I will touch on the glacial lake outbursts in greater details in subsequent slides. Due to the rugged terrain of Bhutan, around 70% of Bhutan's settlements are along the river valleys, which poses greater risks to the people, to the population. In addition, Bhutan is also located in one of the most seismically active zones in the world. As I mentioned, as a mountainous country with a rugged topography, Bhutan is more prone to landslides due to heavy intensity of rainfall and cloud outbursts due to the climate change. For instance, during the monsoon, Bhutan faces a huge challenge due to heavy rainfall. Bhutan also faces very unseasonal weather changes. For instance, last October, which is a harvest season for Bhutan, we experienced incessant rain for about a week, which destroyed the harvest of our villages across the country, which incurred heavy losses to the farmers as well as to the infrastructure of the country. Bhutan has, as I said, has faced because of the change in climate, we have experienced extreme weather conditions, including dry weather, intense rainfall, leading to flash floods and weather windstorm, which destroyed critical infrastructure, including roads and houses. As I mentioned before, as a mountainous country, there are a total of 2,794 glacial lakes in Bhutan, out of which 25 are potentially very dangerous. Due to global warming, we now experience less snowfall as compared to the past, and the glacial lake outbursts glacier at the mountains are melting at very fast rate, which causes glacial lake outbursts, floods in Bhutan. So far, Bhutan had experienced 21 glacial lake outbursts, of which 17 happened in 1950s and 1970s. 4 in the past 4 years. The government is forced to divert substantial resources in mitigation effort, which are earmarked for developmental activities. How do we build the resilience to combat climate change in Bhutan? Bhutan, guided by our unique development philosophy of gross national happiness, and under the guidance of our environmental champion monarchs, Bhutan has demonstrated leadership in environmental conservation and also implementing low-emission development policies. As you may be aware, that Bhutan's constitution mandates that we maintain 60% of our forest cover for all time to come. At present, approximately 72% of our land is under forest cover, which provides a huge carbon sink in Bhutan, for the world. And as I mentioned earlier, 51% of the total land area is under national parks, biological corridors, and wildlife sanctuary. Bhutan has very strong national arrangements, environmental arrangements and frameworks to combat climate change. For instance, we have a National Environmental Protection Act of 2007. We have an Environment Assessment Act of 2000. We have a climate change policy of Kingdom of Bhutan of 2020. Bhutan has had committed to remain carbon neutral for all times to come, as far back as in 2009 at COP15 in Copenhagen. At present, Bhutan is not only carbon neutral, it is carbon negative. Bhutan had also reiterated its commitment to remain carbon neutral in our second nationally determined contribution submitted to UNFCCC. Bhutan has served at the international level. Bhutan has served as the chair of the least development country on climate change under UNFCCC for the last 2 years, which was handed over to Senegal during the COP 2016 in Glasgow. During our chairmanship as an LDC on climate change, Bhutan had promoted the causes. For the benefit of the LDCs at UNFCCC as well as at other international organizations. So to combat climate change, we feel that that knowledge sharing and technology transfer of clean technology is the key to combating the climate change in the world. So what can we offer as a carbon neutral country? Given our good experience in environmental conservation, we can share our experiences and best practices in forest management, as well as on sustainable land management and climate change responses by the government of Bhutan. One important example we can share is what we call Bhutan for Life. It is Bhutan for Life is an innovative funding initiative that aims to provide a sustained flow of finance to maintain countries' protected areas and biological corridors for perpetuity, which is supported by many international organizations, individuals, some NGOs, which is aimed for which will be implemented for 14 years. Until then, the government of Bhutan will take over the cost entirely without foreign assistance. We feel that SAARC member states can benefit by building HR pool in prioritized areas like clean development technologies, weather and hydrological forecasting, glaciers and glacier lake outburst floods, etc. And also through the institutional linkages for the capacity building and data sharing in climate change for mitigation and adaptation. We feel that as a Republic of Korea, as the host country for the Green Climate Fund, we feel that the Republic of Korea can facilitate accessing the GCF fund, for the SAARC member countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soshar. Next, we have Dr. Subrata Bose, an atmospheric physicist with 28 years of working in scientific research and policy. Dr. Bose is currently a scientist at the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of the Government of India. Prior, he has held positions not only in his government, but also with the United Nations and other scientific organizations. Dr. Bose, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone present in this workshop. And it is my pleasure to be here in the 12th ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar. Considering the scheme, I'm just sharing my brief presentation here. I'll just briefly highlight about our position in international negotiation and domestic action. Next, please. So when we talk about the background of climate change, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was established in 1992 with aim to prevent dangerous human interference with climate system. Yeah, I think this part I have already covered, so we can move to the next slide, please. Can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. Previous one, I think another one is there. So, dear friends, to support the global effort to combat climate change over the years, India has ratified United Nations Framework Convention, Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. And I must say that when there was no requirement for reducing GHG emission, India had voluntarily pledged to reduce emission intensity of its GDP by 20 to 25% by 2020, relative to 2005. And it is my pleasure to mention that we have already achieved that target 24% between 2005 to 2016. So all requirements of communication, basically national communication and VUR report are submitted regularly. And under Kyoto Protocol, we have instituted clean national CDM authority for approving clean development projects. And under Paris Agreement, we have, with Gazette notification, we have published Apex Committee for implementation of Paris Agreement. So under CDM, India has registered around 1,388 projects, and with CDM EB, we have issuance of 263 millions of certified emission reduction. So under CDM, we have done a very good job. After we are the second country after China. So under Paris Agreement, basically, we have submitted our national determined contribution to the UNFCCC, and under this Paris Agreement, we have 3 quantifiable targets to reduce greenhouse gas emission of its intensity by 33 to 35% by 2030 from 2005 level. And another target is to achieving 40% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel based energy sources by 2030, and to create an additional carbon sinks of about 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent through additional forest and tree cover by 2030. So next, please. So India participated the COP26 with constructively, and our Honorable Prime Minister has made 5 elements to deal with climate change. So the recent declaration of Honorable Prime Minister has, India will reach the non-fossil fuel energy capacity to 500 gigawatt by 2030. India will meet 50% of its energy requirement from renewable energy by 2030. India will reduce the total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion ton from now onwards till 2030. By 2030, India will reduce the carbon intensity of its economy by less than 45%. And by 2070, India will achieve the target of net zero. So these are the present declaration by our Honorable Prime Minister in COP26 Leadership Summit. Next, please. So while doing this international support and other activities, India is doing a lot from domestic action as well. So India started several domestic initiatives since long. It has launched the National Action Plan on Climate Change. which is the overarching policy framework for climate actions in the country. With 8 national missions, it is supporting both mitigation, adaptation, and climate change knowledge. So each mission has a specific targets and looked by respective nodal ministries. In addition to support this national mission, 33 states and union territories, basically at sub-national level, have prepared their state action plan on climate change to state specific actions at sub-national level. Further, considering the emerging requirements of climate change activities at global level, the states and UTs are updating their SOPs. Next, please. So, leaving aside this national action plan on climate change, India is only few countries having national adaptation plan fund for climate change. And we have so far 30 projects sanctioned at a cost of about USD 112 million, and these projects are covered in 27 states and union territories in vulnerable sectors such as water, agriculture, livelihood, animal husbandry, forestry. And these projects are going on, and one by one these projects will be completing in the next few years. In addition, there are several hundreds of policies, programs, and schemes operating at central level as well as at state level. State means basically sub-national level, supporting adaptation. So some of the list are given here. In addition, so other initiative also there. So next, please. So India non-fossil fuel energy has reached about 40% of our energy mix. India is at the number 4 in the world in installed renewable energy capacity. Indian Railway is one of the largest railway network in the world, has set a target of making itself net zero by 2030. And we have a massive LED bulb campaign, and which is reducing emission by 40 million tons annually. It is noteworthy to mention that India has also initiated the International Solar Alliance and created a coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure for climate action. So these are some of the domestic actions we already have. And when we talk about how to proceed further, India has committed, next please. India has committed to tackle climate change issues over the year, supporting global actions and a domestic initiative, focusing climate change observations, research, mitigation, and adaptation. Today, world believes that India is the only big economy which has delivered in letter and spirit on Paris Agreement. I must say that we are doing a lot, but however, each year India along with the SAARC countries face large-scale climate variability and are exposed to enhanced risks from climate change. Even the recent IPCC report has also focused about the more and more severe events occurring in this region. So considering the problem faced by the people in the SAARC countries due to climate change and climate variability are quite similar in nature, and some of the areas of cooperation in the region may be building capacities for vulnerability assessment, sharing adaptation good practices and experiences with mainstreaming climate change, strengthening disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. Oh, that's all from my side. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Bose, for that presentation. Due to the technical issues, we will have to combine the Q&A for the first and second halves of session 1, which means that we will continue into the next presentation, which is by Mr. Ahmed Wahid, Director of Climate Change Department at the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Technology at the Maldives. Mr. Wahid works on nationwide climate change initiatives, such as those concerning climate change adaptation and resilience. He has worked on behalf of his government and addressing climate change issues for more than 8 years. Mr. Wahid, your presentation, please.
Excellencies, colleagues, participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank the Korean government and also the university and the SAARC collaborative efforts for organizing this important meeting among the SAARC member countries. So indeed, this is a very important meeting to present our case studies, especially SAARC region is one of the hardest regions with regard to the climate change impacts. And good afternoon, good morning from Maldives. My name is Ahmed Wahid. As you have highlighted, I work in the Climate Change Department of the Ministry of Environment. And next slide, please. To begin my presentation, I will first give you a very brief introduction about the Maldives. Maldives is an archipelago of islands made up of almost 1,100 islands, which are very low-lying, and only 187 of the islands are inhabited. And these are divided into 26 natural atolls. The elevation is quite low compared to neighboring countries. We are only just 1.5 meter above the mean sea level. So this is one of the reasons why the climate change is quite a serious issue here in the Maldives. And in addition to physical vulnerabilities, these islands are also extremely vulnerable to economically. This is mainly due to reasons that also common to other, main vulnerable countries, especially the low-lying island states. Next slide, please. So climate change is actually an existential threat to the Maldives. This is mainly because of our unique geography, the low-lying nature of islands, as I mentioned earlier, and the dependency on imports, because we do have very limited, level of production due to many reasons. And the following slides will also give you more information about the vulnerabilities and the responses that we are doing. Next slide, please. So the key vulnerabilities of the Maldives include number one, the low-lying and dispersed nature of the islands, and this makes us very vulnerable to rising seas, as the islands are, as I have mentioned, only 1 meter above the main sea level. And the second point is lack of sufficient resilience to deal with rising incidences of extreme events and disasters. And third point is the economic vulnerability, as we have to import all our basic needs, including food, fuel, and medicine, and other basic needs as well. And the high dependency on tourism with less investments on diversifying the economy remains a great challenge as well, especially when it comes to income generating activities. And this has been well demonstrated in the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, whereas the economy is suffering a lot due to declines in tourism, and hopefully it is recovering now, because there are some restrictions which has been already removed. But still the economy is suffering from the COVID situation that we faced almost for last 1.5 years. The vulnerability of external shocks are also affecting us, such as international oil, the prices, and even the food crisis are also having a high impacts on our economy, and also the availability of these items. As I mentioned, the ongoing COVID-19 has further exposed the underlying vulnerability of the small island states like Maldives. which often depends on the limited sectors as the main income earning activities. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that I have just kept to give you more, just a snapshot on the vulnerabilities of the Maldives, and the data that I have collected from the reports that we have submitted to the UNFCCC, and we found that the main vulnerabilities are mainly, if I just give you a very briefly, these islands are suffering from flooding due to rainfall or from the coastal inundation. And the other vulnerability includes the food security, that because we do have very limited land to grow food, and also the changes in rainfall, and also the inundation of salt water, and the saltwater intrusion is impacting the food security as well. And the saltwater intrusion due to sea level is quite concerning issue here. Rising seas are affecting the islands, and as they are very low-lying islands. And the loss of vegetation is something that we do experience because of the rising seas, and also because of the extreme events. And the limited wetlands and water bodies are impacting also due to sea level rise and change in climate. And because of that, there are impacts on biodiversity as well. The degraded water quality and of the limited groundwater available in the islands because of the saltwater intrusion, and also from pollution due to population activities, related activities. And the waterborne diseases, especially these seasonal and monsoonal diseases, are also sometimes on the rise because of the change in weather. If you look at the dengue and chikungunya cases, these also have some impacts on as we found due to climate change issues. And there are issues that we face due to infrastructure because the infrastructure is close to the shoreline, and there is no way that we can build. There is a very limited land, then it's very difficult to build the infrastructures away from the shoreline. So basically we have to adapt, and we have to alleviate some of the infrastructure, and which is also costly. And also, of course, there are ways that we can do it, but as I mentioned, the cost is one of the main issues. The impacts on coral reefs and marine ecosystem is something that we are concerned of, because we depend a lot on reef systems and the marine biodiversity for our tourism, and also other economic activities such as fishing. So that is a very, very just a small snapshot on the vulnerability sectors that I just mentioned. Next slide, please. So I just brought some, I thought that I will share some information about the impacts of climate change on the coastal areas, because the country is already facing climate change impacts such as coastal erosion challenges, which includes annual flooding events facing almost all islands of the islands, and the severity and the level of impact is differ from island to island. And we found that almost 97% of the islands are reporting shoreline erosions. I mean the inhabited islands mainly. And the 64% are experiencing severe erosion as per our records. So these are some of the figures that we have gathered from the reports. Similarly, due to smallness and nature of the islands, nearly 50% of the housing and other critical infrastructures are close to the coastline, and only few can stand with tidal and flooding events. So it's costly to build hard infrastructure which to support those to stand with those extreme events. And there has been some cases where the islands are depopulated and taking the population to another islands. So which has been the case for decades. Of the main reasons are the environmental changes that those islands are facing. So this, I'm afraid, may increase due to climate change. Next slide, please. Although we are one of the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change, and perhaps one of the most suffering countries, but our greenhouse gas inventory shows that our contribution to the global emission stands at 0.003. So I just wanted to share with you the inventory, how we do, the emission records of the Maldives, because the last inventory was done in 2015, and on which we found that the main, the emissions comes from the energy production. So these are almost 40% comes from the emission production. And also waste is there, and there is a transportation as well. So, but especially I can say that almost 40% of the energy comes from power production. Next slide, please. And with regard to responses, there are a couple of things that the government is doing with a limited, with many challenges that we face. At one hand, we have we have to address the development issues and provide services to the public. And again, we do have to, accommodate. We have to address the climate impacts that we are facing. So there are things that we take on governance and policy. There are tools which definitely help to address the climate impact as well. And there are direct adaptation and mitigation actions that the government is addressing to fight against climate change. Next slide, please. The one of the policy tools that I wanted to highlight here is the Climate Change Act that was approved by the Parliament and enacted by the President very recently. That was in May this year, and this is perhaps the first Climate Change Act that was a the specialized act. I can admit that there has been climate change provisions in previous acts, such as the environment and other acts, which gives provisions to address climate issues within the jargon of the environment and also energy. But this is a specialized act which gives more emphasis on addressing the climate change and taking actions against the climate change impacts. And it also gives a legal structure and governance, guidance to handle the issue, and also how to reduce the emissions or general framework on reducing the emissions, and creating a special fund for climate change for perhaps increasing the resilience and also for the future needs. Next slide, please. And many colleagues have mentioned about the NDC as well. So we do have submitted our first NDC in 2015, and now we have updated our NDC in last year, end of last year. So the NDC mainly targets to reduce the emissions by 26% with our own resources. So this is a target the government has put forward and communicated to the UNFCCC. And if we receive enough resources, funding, and extensive support, we also aim to reduce this to become a net zero country by 2030. I think this is a big pledge from a country like Maldives, but the condition is that, of course, we get enough funding support and resources to address this. And our NDC, we have also included the adaptation resilience building activities, which are related to the areas that I just have highlighted: food security, coastal, and water, and also capacity building and so forth. And there are cross-cutting sectors we have also highlighted, such as the capacity building, the finance, technology, and addressing the needs of the vulnerable communities. Thank you. Next slide, please. So there are several actions in place. Some on adaptation and resilience building, which includes policy interventions related to climate proofing of critical infrastructure, such as the building code and enhancing the building code and improving the building guidelines, which are perhaps which may support the infrastructure resilience, and integrating climate change into national planning processes, as we feel that it is important to integrate the development into it's very important to integrate climate change into development planning, which should go hand in hand. So this is something that we also advocate to the line ministries and also sectors to integrate climate change into their development activities. So this is an ongoing process. And there are coastal protection programs to protect the islands from the erosion, and also to manage the beaches and the critical infrastructure. And due to the weather, to the changes in climate change, some of the islands are also facing water shortages. So the government is building water infrastructure related to water, which includes water security, to strengthen the water security, building the rainwater harvesting facilities to use in emergency, and also providing pipe connections, especially to meet the dry season water shortages we face, because there are many communities who depend on rainwater for their needs. And the next slide, please. And for the mitigation also, we have many programs, such as the programs related to renewable energy installations, and also demand and site management programs. Next slide, please. And the challenges. I just want to highlight those challenges because of as I mentioned, the geographical challenges and availability of adequate resources. And we do have lots of shortcomings in addressing this climate issue. And as you would know, that the burden on budget increases, because then we have to divert some of the activities to these emergency needs. So this is also a challenge that we face. And the timely receiving of international financial commitments is also a challenge for us. We expect more support on the capacity building and research, adaptation and resilience building programs to address climate change, and also the support to implement our NDC, because we do need support to address the strategies that are highlighted in the NDC. And sustainable environmental management, climate change agenda of the government implementation support is also something that we need. So those are the things that I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Wahid. Next, we will welcome Ms. Sujani Rana, who joins us from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Nepal. Ms. Rana recently joined the SAARC section, where she works in coordinating and forming cooperative initiatives with other SAARC states. Prior to the ministry, she had eight years of experience in civil service, including the Consulate General of Nepal in Hong Kong. Ms. Rana, your presentation, please.
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellency Somin Jong, distinguished participants from SAARC member states, representatives from Seoul National University, UNSCAP, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and namaste from Kathmandu, Nepal. I feel honored to attend this 12th ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar. I would like to express sincere thanks and appreciation to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea for taking this initiative and offering us the opportunity to interact and engage. Excellencies, the South Asian region extends from the world's highest Himalayas in the north to the plains and shimmering seas in the south, covering diverse climatic zones. The region is experiencing a wide range of climate change issues. Nepal is one of the most vulnerable countries to the climate change, water-induced disasters, and hydrometeorological extreme events, such as droughts, storms, flood, landslide, debris flow, soil erosion, and avalanches. Based on National Adaptation Plan of Action, NAPA, 2010, 29 districts of Nepal are highly vulnerable to the natural hazard, such as landslide, 22 districts to drought, 12 districts to glacial lake overflow, and 9 districts to flooding. Nepal is ranked the 11th most earthquake-prone country in the world. Earthquake and climate-induced disasters have accelerated vulnerabilities and risks to water and sanitation security, food insecurity, and further made the country highly vulnerable to climate hazards. Nepal, being the founding member and current chair of SAARC, has been contributing to regional cooperation under SAARC for minimizing the risk of climate change. The government of Nepal has recognized climate change adaptation as a fundamental factor to safeguard vulnerable communities, ecosystem, and relevant sectors. Being a party to the Paris Agreement, Nepal remains firmly committed to its implementation and aims to reach the net zero emission by 2045. Recently, addressing the world leaders at the COP26 in Glasgow, Right Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal urged world leaders to recognize the specific climate vulnerability in high mountains and accord high priority to the mountain agenda in all climate-related negotiations, and insisted the parties to agree on a clear roadmap for a new collective, quantified and ambitious goal on climate finance before 2025. Excellencies, Nepal has made sincere efforts to reduce climate hazards and build resilience, help climate vulnerable communities to cope with climate change impacts and reduce impacts of climate change on its people and the people of the whole region. I would like to point out major strategies adopted by the government of Nepal in this regard. Nepal has signed a letter of intent on lowering emission by accelerating forest finance LEAF coalition on 3rd November 2021 on the sidelines of COP26 with an aim to reduce deforestation. National climate change policy was implemented in 2019 with the objective of contributing to socio-economic prosperity of the nation by building a climate resilient society by promoting green economy and low carbon emission. National Adaptation Program of Action, NAPA, was implemented in September 2010 as a way of addressing the impacts made by climate change. National Adaptation Plan process was initiated in Nepal in September 2015 as mandated by the Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We have prepared the National Framework on Local Adaptation Plan of Action as well to implement adaptation actions to the local level and to ensure integration of climate change adaptation into every level of national planning process. Community forest program conducted with the participation of local communities have played pivotal role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Agroforestry and private forest development programs have also played a remarkable role in climate sequestration and climate change adaptation. Nepal National Reducing Emission from Deforestation and Forest Degradation, that is a RED strategy, has been introduced to reduce greenhouse gas emission from deforestation and forest degradation. Considering climate change mitigation and resilience as one of the major strategic pillars, the Forestry Sector Strategy 2016 to 2025 aims to enhance Nepal's forest carbon stock by at least 5% by 2025 as compared to 2015 level. and to decrease mean annual deforestation rate by 0.05% from about 0.44% and 0.18% in the Tarai and Chure areas respectively. Nepal has energy policy for maximum utilization of hydropower potential to meet its domestic demand of electricity by mitigating adverse environmental impacts. In addition, the Agriculture Development Strategy 2015, National Conservation Strategy Framework 2015, Disaster Risk Reduction Management Strategy, and periodical policies provide ample opportunities to help climate vulnerable to adapt and build resilience to climate change impacts. To promote green economy and minimize carbon emission, Government of Nepal has implemented Vehicle Emission Standard 2003, where every vehicle should pass an annual emission test. Government of Nepal has promoted the use of electric vehicle by waiving road tax for the next 5 years, starting from 16th July 2021. Excellencies, South Asia is a region of 1.8 billion people, and everyone residing here will suffer from harsh impact of climate change. To prevent irreversible harm to the climate, we must curb climate warming, greenhouse gas, including carbon dioxide, and direct our activities towards afforestation campaigns. Urgent and large-scale transition to clean and renewable sources of energy from fossil fuel would definitely help to protect and restore nature. In order to achieve this common goal of environmental protection, we need to work together with shared objectives and interconnected activities. Let me once again thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea for taking this initiative and bringing all the SAARC countries together for the betterment of our region. To minimize the adverse impact of climate change in South Asian region demands strengthened cooperation and wider interaction. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Rana. Our final panelist for session 1 is Ruwan Weerasurya, the Assistant Director of Climate Change Secretariat of the Ministry of Environment, Sri Lanka. Mr. Weerasurya comes from more than 20 years of government service, which includes working on projects funded by the World Bank, USAID, and the UN. In his current position, Mr. Weerasurya contributed to the UNFCCC and the nationally determined contributions on behalf of his country. His extensive and dedicated work for the environment has resulted in numerous publications and awards. So we look forward to your presentation. Mr. Weerasurya, the floor is yours.
Good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Ruwan Weerasurya, Assistant Director, Climate Change Secretariat of the Ministry of Environment, Sri Lanka. Hold on a moment, please. It is indeed a great pleasure and privilege to address this 12th ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar representing the Ministry of Environment, Sri Lanka. First of all, I would like to welcome the organizers, the chairman of the session, and the rest of guests from South Korea, invitees of other countries of the SAARC region of the 12th ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar, now in Intercontinental Hotel, Seoul, Republic of South Korea. The leading cause of climate change is global warming caused by greenhouse gas emission. Sri Lanka, a developing country, has greenhouse gas emission of 1.02 ton per capita. But being a tropical island in the ocean, Sri Lanka is highly vulnerable to adverse effects of climate change. The country is experiencing an increase in temperature and significant changes in the rainfall pattern. Changes in the pattern and intensity of the rainfall have resulted prolonged drought and flash floods in many areas in the country. The recent years we have experienced an increase in storm winds, cyclones, and lightning. The top left-hand map shows the hazards map for floods, storm winds, and lightning in the country. Have you seen that my presentation?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay. While the bottom left map shows the drought and heat stress map of Sri Lanka. These intensive rainfalls have induced landslides in higher elevation, as you can see in the top right side map. As an island, sea level rise is also affecting the country with increasing occurrence of coastal erosion. Although not much research is done, the reach of biodiversity and ocean ecosystem are affected by the increasing ocean temperature and ocean acidification. The bottom right map shows the level rise hazard map of the country. The impact of these climate-related events have directly and drastically affected the country's economy, social stability, and ecosystems. When coming into the projections, it shows the condition is getting worse in the future. As you can see on the map, the country has three main climatic zones: the dry zone, intermediate zone, and wet zone. We receive rainfall mainly from two monsoons, southwest monsoon and northeast monsoon. Maps on the right side show the climate projections. Maps on the right side shows the climate projections for southeast monsoon for the time period of 2030, 2050, and 28 years for RCP 4.5 and 8.5 emission scenarios. As you can see in both scenarios, the rainfall is increasing with time for the wet zone of the country. This set of maps shows the climate projections for the northeast monsoon, which is providing rainfall for the country's dry zone. As you can see, the rainfall received from this monsoon is decreasing with time. Therefore, the wet zone will be wetter in the future and the dry zone will be drier. The incidence of extreme weather events has increased. Floods, landslides, and drought have been expected sometimes in the same year or season. Sri Lanka has consistently ranked high globally for its exposure to climate extreme events, according to German Watch Global Climate Risk Index. According to this report, Sri Lanka 4th place in 2018 and 2nd place in 2019 among most affected countries worldwide. Loss and damage from floods in 2016 and 2017 were estimated to be over USD 450 million and USD 360 million respectively. And reconstruction needs around USD 1.6 billion for both years. Droughts have seen the loss of agriculture productivity and a decline in GDP. Climate change impacts economically important sectors and subsectors such as agriculture, plantation, urban development, and small and medium enterprises. Therefore, Sri Lanka has taken numerous initiatives to face the above adverse impacts by preparing national policies, strategies, programs, and action plans, such as the National Climate Change Policy of Sri Lanka, National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy of Sri Lanka, National Adaptation Plan for Climate Impacts of Sri Lanka, sector vulnerability profiles for agriculture, fisheries, health, water and human settlement, technology need assessment, and nationally determined contributions for 2021 and 2030. The National Adaptation Plan for Climate Change Impacts of Sri Lanka was prepared in line with the guidelines set forth by the UNFCCC in collaboration with all the respective government and non-government stakeholders to be implemented from 2016 to 2025. The map of Sri Lanka has identified the 9 most vulnerable sectors to the adverse impact of climate change. Food security is the main sector, which includes agriculture, livestock, and fisheries. In addition, health, water, coastal and marine, export agriculture, biodiversity and ecosystems, tourism, human settlement and infrastructure are also identified as vulnerable sectors. Although transport, energy and industry were considered mitigation sectors, they are also taken as one sector in the NAP considering their vulnerability aspects. Under each of these sectors, adaptation needs and actions needed have been identified with KPI, time targets, budgets, and most importantly, responsible agencies. In addition to the 9 sectors, cross-cutting issues, which are common to all sectors, were taken as a separate sector in this plan and given the adaptation actions. These include policy, legal, economic and governance issues, institutional development and coordination, international cooperation and partnership, resource mobilization, research and development, technology transfer, education, training, awareness, climate-induced disaster risk management, and climate information management. Like many countries in the world, Sri Lanka too is a party of the Paris Agreement, which aims to limit the global temperature rise below 2 degrees compared to the pre-industrial era. Each country indicated their intended GHG reduction targets through national determined contributions. Sri Lanka national determined contributions for 2021 to 2030 address mainly the mitigation and 6 subsectors such as power, transport, industry, forestry, waste, and agriculture. Considering the adaptation sector, there are 9 subsectors NDCs: agriculture, biodiversity, health, livestock, coastal and marine, cities and human settlement, fisheries, water including irrigation, tourism and recreation, and loss and damage. There are many resource requirements and gaps identified during the technology need assessment, national adaptation plan, and nationally determined contribution for 2021 to 2030. Mainly, we identified that financial investment for both mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage sector is a big challenge. Finance and technology needs for climate smart agriculture, climate forecasting and early warning, water and irrigation conveyance, climate smart cities and tourism infrastructure, energy generation including renewable energy technologies, energy storage facilities, low carbon transport, and urban infrastructure and coastal resilience improvement are another challenges. The collection of emission data was a big challenge because many institutions do not have proper mechanism to record emission data. Therefore, capacity building need for institutional development and strengthening, developing human resource through education, training, research and development, networking, partnerships, and sharing the experience across sectors and beyond. Web-based tools, ICT applications, online courses to improve technical understanding and new knowledge are very important. Access to climate finance through national institutions and the private sector is also essential. Thank you very much. And if you need further information, please visit our website, climatechange.lk. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rasuria. Now, with that, we would like to open the floor for questions and comments. The first question is from our YouTube viewers and is for Mr. Khan. The question is, Mr. Khan, you mentioned that it would be possible to reduce Bangladesh's greenhouse gas emissions to 15% under BAU by 2030 if there was sufficient support from developed economies. In the context of your country, what sort of support would be the most needed and effective for that effort? Thank you. Sorry, I believe you're on mute. Mr. Khan, you have to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. You know, Bangladesh, we adopted multimodal approach. The main thing that is contributing to carbon emissions is using of fossil fuels. So we are now focusing on non-fossil fuel like solar energy, atomic energy. This will reduce a substantial amount. Moreover, you know, it's global trend to shift from fossil fuel run car to electric vehicle. This is also a priority in our country. And likewise, in all areas where carbon emission happens, we do have programs to shift to non-carbon emission energy sources. So this is, and in this all sectors, we need technical plus financial support from the developed country. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there are any questions from the floor, now we are open to receiving them. Otherwise, I will ask a question myself. I did have a question for Ms. Rana. So in your presentation, you had identified the potential of carbon sequestration as a community action. And there's been quite a lot of views about how that is a powerful means to balance both environmental and social objectives as a community effort. And the PM of Nepal had also identified the goal to increase forest coverage by 45%. What are some of the crucial steps that you think will be necessary to achieve this goal? And what do you foresee as some of the potential challenges in reaching that rather ambitious objective? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, Government of Nepal has already adopted the community forestry program that is specifically brings together all the community people and work for the forest protection and management of the forest by themselves. In such condition, we have seen from last around 20 years, we have seen huge amount of increase of the forest area in Nepal, and the community forestry program that was implemented then, from then till now, it has been really successful and has greatly helped in carbon sequestration and climate change adaptation. And Right Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal, he had in the COP26, he stated about reaching net zero by 2045, and he has specifically urged all the government leaders, all the states leaders for increasing their effort for protecting the climate and mainly the mountain environment. And as Nepal is a mountainous country, we have been experiencing various problems regarding climate change issues. So our steps will be focused towards it. And I would like to mention another step that is taken by Government of Nepal. Actually, it was there is a specific program that was scheduled to be held in 2020. It is known as Sagarmatha Sambad. That is a dialogue program where.
Sorry, Ms. Ran, I think your internet connection has broken up, so you'll have to come back to that. Any other questions from the floor or YouTube? Otherwise, I believe we will conclude this session with this. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties. So with that, I hope we can join me in thanking the panelists for this session and their valuable time. We will now have a 20-minute break for coffee and refreshments. Thank you again for joining this session, and see you again soon.
Welcome to session 2 of the 12th ROK-SAARC Partnership Seminar. My name is Ju-Hyun Lee from Seoul National University Asian Center. In this session, we will be discussing ROK-SAARC cooperation on climate change response and future strategy. We are so fortunate to have distinguished experts on this topic. We will host 3 speakers, which will be followed by discussion and Q&A session. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Professor Jun Kim, a director of Future Earth program at Seoul National University Asia Center. Professor Kim has been pursuing transdisciplinary vision of healthy ecological societal system in Asia. He is also leading complex systems science and visioning SDG lab in the Department of Landscape, Architecture and Rural System Engineering and Seoul National University. Professor Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Slide, please. Okay. Thank you. In my presentation, I'm going to talk about visioneering, which is an essential but neglected framework for the great transition to sustainability. And I would like to share the big picture and the complex systems view on our climate change responses and strategies. We're going to briefly look at the lessons learned from COVID-19 and SAARC as well, and then just remind ourselves with 3 bottlenecks to sustainability, as well as tools for transition to sustainability. And then we talk about what visioneering is all about, which will lead us to paradigm shift based on a new framework, which must be guided by scientific principles and followed by recap. So the lessons from COVID-19, this is mostly from the book by Zachariah, published at the end of last year. And COVID-19 outbreak was inevitable, perhaps, but the pandemic was optional. But we ended up choosing pandemic. Our challenge has not been arriving at solutions, but finding willingness to implement these solutions. Humanity, all of us have confronted such crossroads before, and we should have looked outward toward more and better cooperation. Instead, we ended up turning inward and embraced nationalism and self-interest. And we have witnessed from all these almost 2 years of experience that governance and management and monitoring played a key role. And these lessons are kind of similar to perhaps the lessons from 35 years of SAARC cooperation and partnership history. And all of us are eagerly looking forward to a recovery, going back to new normal based on resilience theory. We must ask ourselves the following 3 questions. The recovery that we're longing for is truly a recovery that strengthens us to prevent and withstand another crisis to come. These costly lessons will truly create opportunities for everyone, for example, in SAARC region, to live minimal life that is healthy and satisfying. And finally, how can we do this without jeopardizing the capacity of neighbors in need and vulnerable countries and next generations to meet their basic living needs? The reasons are the following 3 bottlenecks why we are going through this hardship. Basically, lack of 3 basics. Number 1, lack of willingness to embrace and implement changes and challenges, mostly political willingness. And then the capacity building that has been mentioned in the previous presentation for transformation needed for our ecological societal systems. And finally, the proper understanding, scientific understanding of our complex systems. We have been provided with 5 tools for the transition to sustainability by Meadows et al. In the famous book, Limits to Growth. And they are visioning, which means envisioning a sustainable world. The second tool is networking, which is all about building platforms to communicate and learn. And the third tool is truth-telling. It boils down to data and an information platform, information governance and stewardship. And the fourth tool is learning, crafting usable knowledge and linking them to action. And finally, loving, love and empathy, institutionalized in collective solutions. And all of these 5 tools could be encompassed in one process called visioneering. So visioneering is basically engineering a vision which is a picture of preferred future. Or in other words, foresight with insight based on hindsight. We have been hearing all these hindsight from SAARC cooperation and partnership and some insights in order to gain foresight. On the other hand, engineering is a combination of 2 processes, skillful direction and creative application of 2 things. Number 1, experiences. And number 2, scientific principles to develop either systems, processes, or products according to the purpose. Therefore, visioneering will help us to weave our passion, motive, integrity, determination, and commitment and purpose into a paradigm shift. Our current situation is not looking up. The present ecological societal systems are in crisis, as we have heard in the previous presentations. And without paradigm shift, we will end up future that is unsustainable. But if we go through and choose the paradigm shift now, we may be able to arrive future that is sustainable. And this can be done through the visioneering, which is a harmonious triad of governance, management, and monitoring. Governance is basically a vision casting, continuing process of providing vision, learning, and resolving trade-offs, and planning to adapt to the unfolding future. On the other hand, management is basically putting the vision into reality, into action. And monitoring is basically observation and the synthesis of all these observations translate into narratives which will be provided as a feedback to the system for learning process for future adaptation. Important thing is there is an opportune point of place and time for visioneering. So let's look at the place to intervene in a system. This is directly from Meadow in 1999. There are 12 leverages to intervene system, complex system. And basically playing with numbers and buffer size or more or less material flows and stocks. And this is mostly monitoring part. Then as we go up to a higher leverages to intervene a system, we're talking about information flow and controlling the system organization and rules. And that's more or less management. And then finally, and these are more or less related to hard power. And then finally, the highest level of leverage are related to paradigm shift and the visioneering, which is vision casting in a manner that is convincing and unifying. And these are related to more or less soft power. There is also an opportune point of time to intervene in a system. And the systems, for example, individual countries in SAARC, or even systems within such countries, they're all complex systems, and all these complex systems are going through adaptive cycles based on resilient theory, starting from launch phase with exploitation, and grow and mature to conservation stage, And then with the disturbance and shocks and surprises, system is breaking down to destructive, creative destruction. And then finally, finding an opportunity to getting out of the way, either continue the same cycle or transformate it to a completely different systems. So any systems or even countries, for example in SAARC, may be at different phases of these adaptive cycles. And some of these things that we mentioned earlier, like changing carbon emission, stocks and buffers and delays, they should be applied to appropriate time and place. Of course, this has to be viewed from the big picture based on a new frame. So if we just look back for the last half century, humanity has started with a separate view on social system and natural system. Social system mostly have been interested in how to control and optimize the social system. On the other hand, natural scientists have been interested in just mainly function and structure of natural ecosystems. Again, mostly based on disciplinary approach. And gradually, human was concerned about well-being and considered the natural ecosystem from ecosystem service perspective, based on multidisciplinary approach. And finally, about 3.5 decades ago, the paradigm of sustainability was coined. And we started thinking about ecosystem integrity as well as social preference, value, and vision, which are colliding to one another. And interdisciplinary approach was not enough. So finally, there came donut economics, for example, by Kate Raworth, basically showing that we have 3 limits. I call it trilemma. The first one is the upper limit, the ecological ceiling, which include climate change, because climate change is only one of the planetary boundaries that humanity has been trespassing. At the same time, there is a social base, which is the lower limit that we're not supposed to fall short. But there is also hidden limit, which is related to thermodynamics. In other words, entropy increase for whatever actions that we take. So if we just zoom in that planetary boundaries, as I have mentioned, climate change is only one of the several domains in planetary boundaries that humanity is not supposed to trespass. And there are like freshwater withdrawal, which was also mentioned, land use and cover change, biogeochemical cycles of nitrogen and sulfur, and loss of biodiversity, you name it. But now we have to add one more, epidemic disease, as another planetary boundary that we have to be concerned about. And scientists and people from different perspectives have arrived to mention this. First generation, we are the first generation finally to have realized what we have done to our planet. Unfortunately, we might be the last generation who can do something to change our path toward unsustainable future. So, envisioning healthy ecological societal systems could be examined from this one simple figure. This figure shows 2 horizontal and vertical axis. The vertical axis is basically showing social threshold achieved by individual countries. This data is from about 150 countries. And the horizontal axis is showing biophysical boundaries transgressed. In other words, as we move from left to right, the ecosystems are destroyed. So if we are focused on domain C, the top right corner, most of the high-income countries are located in C domain. The meaning is that their high social status, satisfactory social foundation has been achieved at the expense of destroying our ecosystem. This is based on global footprint, because this is kind of contradictory. by taking a look at the low-income countries where they are located in domain A, so their social status are not very satisfactory. But they still have plenty of room for growth and development in terms of ecological ceiling. But then if we look into these individual countries in most of the SAARC region, their environmental condition is not the best. And SAARC is located right here. And in terms of carbon emission per capita, the diagram doesn't change very much. The point is that what we're trying to do is to follow the past footprint of the countries which are located in domain B and C. And we don't have to do that. There is a better way. Domain D is our vision, a so-called donut space, the just and safe, healthy space for all humanity. And this donut space could be envisioned and combined with the visioneering, which will guide this donut space framework with the feed-forward loop based on the harmonious triad of governance and management and monitoring, which will lead us not to follow the previous path, but directly move from where we are for SAARC, for example, directly into donut space. This is a simple example that we have analyzed the COVID-19 data until May of this year. And this shows new metrics for complex system analysis. So resilience, well-known index resilience, but there is another one, complexity. And also we compared these results with Bloomberg resilience, which included 13 indicators. So if you just look at China, for example, here, there are two categories of resilience. In terms of resilience, the Chinese system to cope with COVID-19 has been high. Resilience was high. But in terms of complexity, they are very low, meaning that they recover, but then they have learned not much. So they ended up becoming vulnerable because they haven't really adapted to this new situation and disturbances. On the other hand, if you look at Japan and Korea, for example, resilience is kind of intermediate level, but then complexity, which is the balance between volatility to the changes in environmental condition and the stability, the resilience of the system. These are kind of doing the tug of war to maintain the subtle balance. Through this process, the system learns how to adapt. So Japan and Korea, resilience is in the intermediate level, but then complexity is at the highest level, meaning that these countries have been learning how to adapt and how to deal with the new surprises and shocks. So they would be better prepared for the future shocks. As expected, if you look at USA, resilience was low, complexity was low. They're also ranked rather low in Bloomberg resilience. When we look at the largest country in SAARC, India, resilience was low, but then complexity is higher, which is promising. All of these visioneering processes, or all the application and actions in our effort to climate change responses and strategies, they have to be guided by scientific first principles. Sustainability is all about moving from present point A to future point B. And there are many options for us to choose the path. But which path is the most sustainable and the best option? It has to be guided by scientific principles, for which we're not prepared. But here are some candidates for visioneering principles. Number one is principle of least action. All the actions that we are trying to do, in sum, has to be minimized, because action in physics, by definition, is an integration of energy multiplied by time. And second principle would be entropy, meaning nothing is free. Whatever action we take is costly, and someone has to pay, as I have shown earlier. And then there is the complexity, the subtle balance between responding to the change and maintaining the stability of the system. So to summarize, complex system views provide us hindsight and insight on trilemma in coping with climate crisis, upper limit, lower limit, and hidden limit. And climate crisis is indeed an opportunity to accelerate transitions of our system's regime shift, not toward just resilience or new normal, but go beyond seeking resilience to anti-fragility, in which system actually gets even better with surprises and shocks. And again, there is an opportune point of time and place to intervene in complex adaptive systems. In other words, the situation is all different in SAARC. Again, we should be reminded of 5 tools: visioning, networking, truth-telling, learning, and loving, which could be encompassed in visioneering, which is an essential but neglected framework that has to be guided by scientific principles. To do that, we should strive to understand the nature, cost, and principles of visioneering. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Professor Kim. Next, we have Dr. Sang-In Kang, a Chief Research Fellow of Korea Adaptation Center for Climate Change at Korea Environmental Institute. Dr. Kang served for the UN Office for Sustainable Development and OECD Environment Directorate as senior expert. He has been working as a member of Korean delegation to UNFCCC and Paris Agreement. Recently, he coordinated EU-IUC Korean project on local climate action planning. Dr. Kang, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, colleagues. It's my real pleasure to share my experience with you on this very important forum. To get an idea on climate change response and the future strategy, it is very much important to get a structured understanding of the climate change governance, because, as you know, climate system is very much complex and interdisciplinary one. Let's take a look around the structure of the current climate change governance with Paris Agreement concluded in 2015. And Article 2 set the goals on temperature between 2 to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and also it covers the adaptation and financial targets. And Article 3 shows the strategy of implementation in terms of the nationally determined contributions. So it is bottom-up approach to get the target set in Article 2. And from the Article 4 to Article 8, it covers the actions to be taken in logical sequence. First, we mitigate the climate change, and then we adapt to the existing and current and future climate change, and finally we address loss and damage which goes beyond our adaptive capacity. And we count finance, technology, capacity building as a means of implementation to assure the implement those actions. And Article 13, transparency, Article 14, global stocktake, and Article 15, implementation and compliance is the condition to get an effective accomplishment of the whole climate change governance. So this is the background of our reasoning today. And 2 weeks ago, we closed the 6-year-long a negotiation on the rule book of the Paris Agreement, and it is detailed in the cover decision of the COP26. And when you look at this cover decision, we know that the science and urgency comes first, and then adaptation and adaptation finance follows. So it's a little reverse compared to the governance structure of the Paris Agreement. This means that the adaptation and action on adaptation finance is the top priority of the current climate action strategy. And then below, the loss and damage is still a little lagged behind because there are some unagreed issues between the developed and developing countries. So with these two slides, we clearly know that the priority moves from the mitigation to the adaptation, and it will go to the loss and damage management in coming years. And I think that my understanding on the South Asian region is quite limited, and I try to find some key economic indicators, for example, the gross national income level of the South Asian countries, and compared it to the world economic growth trajectory between 16th century to 20th centuries. I found that there are much similarity between the two growth trajectory. It has a shape of the exponential growth trajectory. We know that the past world economic growth pattern is based on the fossil fuels. We can see in the Industrial Revolution, and then colonialization and globalization follows, boost up this world economic growth. But in the case of the South Asian countries, digital revolution and hyperconnectivity linked to the global market expansion may be the locomotive of the regional economic growth. But there are still big challenges in the case of the South Asia in this diagram, is the depletion and degradation of the natural resources together with the climate change due to the fossil fuel use. The recent report of the World Bank 2021 report on the South Asia, it is recommended that service-led development strategy was quite promising for the South Asian countries, and but still there are big challenges due to the agglomeration economies, its job creation and energy congestion and housing and other challenges linked to the climate change, hotspot, storm surge, etc. So this observation give us a clear strategy and objectives summarized in this slide. We need to enhance socio-economic and ecological resilience to climate crisis. And to cope with these challenges, we needed to institutionalize national and local adaptation planning system. And secondly, we needed to introduce tailored climate crisis management system for urban and rural livelihood. And it may be composed of the building national and sub-national geo-referenced impact assessment and early warning system. And secondly, the adoption of integrated water, energy, food solutions. And finally, introduce ecosystem-based farming technologies. So these objectives and the strategies are the recapitulation of the presentation in the session 1. And I'd like to introduce some concrete component of collaboration items. So actually I'm working for the Korean Adaptation Center for Climate Change. Korean Adaptation Center is the Policy Research Institute supporting the national adaptation planning and implementation at a local level. And it has 4 objectives and strategies and 7 functions. You can take note later through this slide. I will not go into the details. And KACCC has two tools, policy supporting tools in adaptation sector. The first one is the vulnerability assessment tool to develop climate change adaptation plan. It is called VESTAP. So this is a kind of integrated indicator-based assessment tool. It covers 57 assessment indicators across 7 categories of actions. So health, territorial and coastal infrastructure, agriculture and livestock, and forestry and ecosystems, water management, and marine fisheries and industries. So these 7 sectors are shown, are touched in the presentation of the session 1 as the main action areas of climate change response and collaboration. And KACCC support the local government to develop their own adaptation planning, covering those 7 action areas. So it is very interesting to be shared with the local government and the municipalities in South Asian countries. And the second tool is more comprehensive and integrated platform. It is called the Korean Model of Integrated Impact and Vulnerability Evaluation Systems. So this is geographically referenced decision-making tools. It covers also the 6 thematic areas: health, water management, agriculture, forestry, ecosystem, and ocean and fishery. And also it covers the 6 policy objectives from food security and supply services, etc. And also this integrated platform covers the interlinkage between the action areas and the policy objectives, and geographically referenced graphic presentation could help the intuitive understanding of the vulnerability and the impact of climate change. The time span covers up to 2080 with the mean of 10-year cumulative values, and also spatial range covers 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid details. And also it is very easily accessible user interface, and also open to the local government officers and also stakeholders and experts working in the research and development sector. So these are the 2 collaborative action items to be shared in Korean as South Asian cooperation platform. And the next one is the local level and municipal level cooperation items developed by the International Climate Environment Center. International Climate Environment Center is the metropolitan city, Gwangju Metropolitan City owned institute, which hosts the Urban Environmental Accord Secretariat. The UEA, Urban Environmental Accord, was the city-to-city cooperation network launched in 2005 in support of the UNEP. And then ICC developed 2 kinds of municipal level policy decision-making tools. The first one is the urban carbon management systems. Based on the administrative statistics on the emission sources by fuels and by economic activities, they established a big database, and through the graphic presentation, they provide the current emission level and emission source. Yeah. So this emission database is linked to the GIS, Geographic Information Systems, and provide this type of graphic presentation. And by integrating other administrative statistics, for example, the social security and the public health care, these system is used to evaluate the vulnerability and the resilience of the city territory. And this is the first tool to be shared with the South Asian municipalities. And the second tool is the urban assessment modeling systems. This is the tool of three-dimensional and mathematical simulation-based forecasting tools. It used the Global Forecasting System database supplied by the National Centers of Environmental and Prediction and the Korean Meteorological Agency database. So these are the graphic presentation of the UAMS system, Urban Assessment Modeling Tools. And then it is interesting to look in the down side figures. The figure 2 shows the wind courses and also the heat accumulation in the high-rise building areas. So this is three-dimensional, so we can easily understanding where the heat accumulates in extreme weather event and where is the more accommodated living areas. And then this type of policy decision-making tools is very useful to a resilient urban planning also and land use management policies. Yeah, ICC provide through UEA, Urban Environmental Accord, capacity building programs, and also the ICC COICA global training programs, the multiple capacity building opportunities for the local government officers in the regions. And this is very useful to be shared with you for further cooperation platform. And there are also other interesting technologies and cooperation items. For example, this slide shows the 100 kilowatt grid connected testbed in rice field. So these days, Korean farmers are quite interested in adopting this kind of energy food integrated solutions. And then this is linked to the grid, national grid. And the other type is the 100 kilowatt off-grid testbed in vegetable plot and the smart farming systems. This is developed by the rural development agencies. And this type of off-grid testbed is quite useful in the remote rural areas development in many developing countries. And then next one is to the farmers cooperatives were quite active in adopting this type of solar farming systems. So I think that the farmers association and the farmers cooperatives in South Asian countries can be connected to these Korean farmers cooperatives to promote and to share their experiences. And the last one is the eco-farming practice adopted by some pioneering farmers. Actually, the upper left-hand side slide shows that there is an antagonism between pathogen fungi and the microorganisms in the soils. And by selecting those specialized microorganisms in the soil and through the massive cultivation and applied to the some test bed, it gives very interesting outcomes. The interesting point is that the microorganism kills the pathogen fungi, and the decomposed materials of the pathogen fungi are used as a nutrient for the plant growth. So this kind of eco-farming practice also can be useful to be shared through the Korean SAARC platforms. So this is the end of my presentation, and I think that all these tools and practice are developed by the institute, in-house institute capacities, so they are ready to be shared easily once after the the Korean SAARC cooperation platform is established, it is very easily transferred without any difficulties. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation, and thank you very much for your understanding.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Dr. Kang. Next, we will welcome Dr. Soo-young Lee, who joined us from the Green Technology Center, a government-affiliated research institute in science and technology. GTC undertakes research on climate technology policy and international cooperation project for climate technology transfer. Dr. Lee particularly working on development of climate technology strategy for carbon market mechanism toward the Paris Agreement. She is in charge of supporting the Korean government to establish laws, policy, and regulation related to greenhouse gas emission reduction, national carbon market, and carbon offsetting system. Dr. Lee, the floor is yours.
Okay, my name is Soo-young Lee. Good afternoon. I'm a senior researcher of the Green Technology Center. Today, I'm going to talk about the Green Technology Cooperation for Innovative Climate Actions. So I'm the last one. Probably you're very much exhausted, so I'm just skip it, and then maybe we can discuss further based during the discussion session if you want to need more information. So the first slide is that just to give you a brief introduction of the GTC, what we are, who we are, and what we are doing now. The GTC is a government-funded policy research institute focusing on developing green technology, R&D policies, and demonstration of green technologies in developing countries. We support them through technology assistance programs such as TA project, that is why we deeply discussed later on the presentation file, and then focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and tackling the issues of the climate change. So we are introduce the Korea-specific technology, and then based on the outcomes of the R&D, and then based on the understanding from the Euro countries, and then combined together. And then we find a good solution. And then based on this solution, we would like to support to your countries to implement in the actual practices. So that is the actual practices I'm going to talk about today more. So, as you can see, this is a map that GTC has implementing a number of overseas projects in regarding to green technology policy development and technology demonstration in over 16 countries around the world. Even though our research center is currently 8 years, but we covered more than 16 countries to implement and to support in terms of the green technology policy and development things. Especially, we have built a strong relationship with the ASEAN countries, such as Indonesia and Vietnam, considering their strategic diplomatic relationship with our country. We have undertaken a number of projects across diverse sectors, including solar, bioenergy, flood mitigation, water management, and waste to energy the practices, and also the adaptation planning on the broader scale. So most of the work we followed, the first thing is the global agenda, which is a UNFCCC's framework. But we also think about in terms of the sustainability, we also following up the issues that is outside of the UNFCCC framework. So GTC operated under the UNFCCC framework, this one. You can see that mechanism to support implement a technical assistance project through Korean NDE. So the NDE is NDE is national designated entity, which is a government bodies, and they're directly communicated with the UNFCCC. So the financial mechanism is mostly financial government side that they communicate together. From our side, the Ministry of Finance, which is NDA. But the technology part is NDA. NDE is Ministry of Science and ICT, which is we are under the supervision of the Ministry of Science and ICT. So that's why we are communicated very closely, and then closely communicated with these ministries, and then also the following up the UNFCCC and also the Paris Agreement. But the outside of the UNFCCC's framework, we are following up the P4G Secretariat. P4G is only one. The public-private partnership boosting newly engaged partnership. And then this year, the President Moon, our government, is hosted the second leaders at a high-level dialogue to be held in Korea in May. We mostly work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we have a very strong relationship with those two platforms or the mechanism. So from the Green Technology Center, we think about the innovative climate action is for proactive technology cooperation is very essential. So this part of this sentence and then this knowledge, this philosophy is not just comes from not us. This comes from the other side, very global leader groups. So we also very much positively think about that. So that's why we support the countries tackling the climate change issues very proactively based on the technology transfer or technology assistance. So as you can see that this slide that the President Moon mentioned about, sorry for this subtitle is Korean, but the mention that is the President Moon mentioned that through the GTC, using the GTC, Korea government wants to transfer the technology in terms of the climate change against the climate change issues. So this is the official record from our our president. So the climate technology cooperation process, we set this process in-house. So following this process, we are working, and then we are processing based on individual countries. The first step is diagnosing of the developing countries, because the countries is individually the different aspects and then different agendas. So based on this diagnosis, we think about which part is the very essential, and then which part is the initial point to support or implement some kind of the actions in terms of the climate change issues. So the first thing is that we think about the needs assessment, and then based on the needs assessment data, we think about what kind of technology would be would be useful to especially for the countries. So based on that, we rolling the small amount from small financial resources from the CTCN or the Ministry of Science and ICT or the other government side, which is like a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we, based on these financial sources, we support through these technical assistance. And then based on that, we also preparing the next step. We helping the next step to in terms of the sustainability aspect. So like finding another financing sources, or like snowballing effect, we would like to rolling these kind of the actions to make bigger size of the snowball. So that is maybe this kind of the snowball effect based on the grant or loans or other technical or financial support. And also we think about the capacity building things. So from this slide, that is very specific, and then mostly from our side, it's one of the best practices we implemented and then very successfully ongoing the project is I would like to present today. So there are several thematic areas that we think about in terms, especially green transportation, waste to energy management, and also the carbon market things. So GTC could leverage its expertise and knowledge in the form of public and private partnership. This one is the Bhutan project. The Bhutan Green Transportation Project aims to introduce and implement efficient transportation system. I'm not sure you guys have an experience to the public transportation system in Korea. Not yet, probably. Yes, we have automatically downloaded the information on how far from the bus station here to there, and then 2 or 3 minutes later the bus is coming or not. Kind of the information we very easily, and then it's free. So that kind of the ITS system we introduced to the Bhutan for the climate change issues. So the Bhutan, which was initially supported by the CTC&TA program, which is under the UNFCCC's technology mechanism framework, and then joint research program is based on the feasibility study conducted through the piloting testing. This project proves its potential for scaling up, and was approved the Green Climate Funds project preparation facility financing amount of $1.5 million. So the first we start the needs assessment, and then the Bhutan country needs kind of this technical assistance. So we support, we implement the kind of the action as a testing pilot testing, and then based on these outcomes, we brought another big fund from the Green Climate Fund. So this project is still ongoing, accompanied with the World Bank. The second model is combining with the ODA fund to the PPP model. So the technology cooperation projects are funded with diverse development aid operations that are supported through ODA grant and then research fund. In the case of the Indonesia Waste to Energy project involves both research and development objectives and aims to support research capacity building and, of course, demonstration of the innovative technology, which is from the Korean specific side in Indonesia for providing solutions to waste issues. A comprehensive analysis on waste problems and then applicable technologies were examined, and its findings were put to use for preparing outline business case, which identified appropriate intervention scheme through the public and private sector engagement. So this very thematic and then very complicated the flow that we invented, and then this kind of the action is still ongoing. I mean, the infrastructure is working on currently. So maybe 3 or 5 years later, we can very small amount of the waste to the energy in Indonesia side. We hope. So the third case is ODA, CTC, and carbon market linkage program. It's a very new one, and then that is very successfully also moving. It's a Bangladesh case. The Bangladesh Clean Water Supply project involves more diverse financing and technology planning. The facility provides water for residential and drinking use up to 20,000 liters that caters the needs for over 40 100,000 people per facility with the use of the high energy efficiency water purification technology. I mean, this is the core scientific technology comes from the Korea side. We use the filter, and then we implement the filter system in the Bangladesh side. And then they provided a very, very clean water using this filter system. And also this filter system we can get the carbon offset amount. This could be estimated and to be provided to the credits. And that is actual credits and then actual, cost earned. So we can tangibly exchange the carbon credit to money. So this type of the money that is the basement of the operation and maintenance objectives in the Bangladesh side. So we also provided that kind of the money earned from the carbon credits. The carbon credit generated with the operation of this facility will compensate the maintenance cost, of course, I already mentioned that, by selling CERs, which economic value worth $1 million per 10 years. This carbon market system, Korea, we have our domestic carbon market system. So this carbon offset, it's just let in Bangladesh is no worth, but it's imported from Korea side that is highly worth. So kind of this trading system using the carbon market, we exchange the values. Final one is not only diverse financing and technology schemes, diversified business model, but different forms of the partnership enables innovative project planning. In the case of the IoT for Mekong Delta Vietnam project, you can see that includes more comprehensive business model that intends to gain more private sector leverage by supporting them, closely engage with the local business and government. The landscape of this partnership demonstrated complicated nature of technology cooperation project, which indicates the importance of close and rigorous needs assessment, scalable and applicable technologies. Interest of all entities should be in the right place. This is a very complicated system. We think about this system based on the needs from the Vietnam side in the Mekong Delta. They are very difficult in terms of the use of the water. They have plenty of water, but they cannot use wisely because the upper side, there is so many dams implemented by the China, so the water is slowly lower. Decrease the amount of the water and of the bottom side. But this one is very international cooperation, and then we think about the negotiation things whatsoever. But on Vietnam side, it has no power to stop the dam system, so that's why they knocking to our center to solve this problem. Wisely use of the water. So that's why we think about introduce our water management system first, and also using the information, serving the systems in terms of the IoT-based solution. So that kind of the actions we are still ongoing based on the P4G platform. So many of the public and private sectors, they are involved already. So we probably next year we can implement actual practices in the Vietnam side. This one is already, you can see very bottom line of the presentation file. I'm very sorry for that. First, we think about with cooperation with the Denmark and then Korea side. So what kind of innovation technology is useful to solve this Vietnam Mekong Delta specific needs? So the first year we think about ICT-based solution would be nice. And then we also think about the water management system. I mean, integrated water management system, it could be useful to the side. So we invite another private and then public technology provided expertise in Korea, and also the UN bodies. So it's still ongoing. I mean, maybe next time we can provide a more advanced result, I hope. So to walk you through on some of other achievements in policy development aspects, GTC has built intensive research network around the world. One of the cases in Cambodia, where we developed a national action plan for sustainable and built low-emission transport system again. We developed a GCF readiness project proposal on climate technology deployment roadmap for e-mobility, and now waiting for the GCF approval, because we are the specialized of the readiness program designated by the GCF in Korea first and ever. So that's why we're waiting. Probably we got a fund from the GCF side. Then we can proceed another step. Also, GTC has conducted a joint policy research with the Stockholm Environment Institute. You can see this middle side of the report. See that on the presentation file, dealing with the cross-border environmental issues, and then came up with the strategic solutions. Last one is we also supported the Office for Government Policy Coordination to develop a national action plan for Green New Deal ODA scheme. We outlined the national Green ODA budget target in Korea and key measures to assist partner countries like SAARC. Green transition, and the findings was approved by Committee for International Development and Cooperation, which is led by the Prime Minister in Korea. So this is also another program development that we provided, but this is already mentioned before, so probably I'm just skipping it. This is the last slide I would like to mention about that. I mean, climate change issues is very essential as a proactive technology cooperation from our side. And also the technology cooperation involves complex process. I mean, already Professor Jun Kim mentioned about that very diverse and then multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary. Think about is very essential in terms of the sustainability. Yes, we also 100% for sure think about it and then agreed. So we approach very holistic innovation thinking. So it is critical that having a holistic perspective when initiating technology project planning, which could be materialized in a more constructive partnership by having its mutual understanding and foundation through global initiatives. On the basis of these global initiatives and partnership platform, many mentioned about the UNFCCC and then a non-UNFCCC platform like a P4G, is application and diffusion of the innovation technology could be facilitated with more diversified business model and partnerships. So those 4 pillars we are considering very seriously when we collaborated and then cooperated together with the SAARC or ASEAN countries, especially. So, yes, that's all I have. So I'm not sure you guys have interested or not, but maybe you have another maybe question and answers. Please answer. Please contact me, and probably you can get an information from the Secretariat of the SAARC today. Thank you very much.
Dr. Lee, thank you very much for your presentation. Now we will have the last session of today. So we will have discussion and Q&A session with all the 3 speakers. And during that time, we can have a question from the SAARC country or anyone who watching the YouTube. So I'd like to invite all the speakers to the front, but just wait 1 minute until the table is set.
Okay, well, thank you. Considering the limited amount of time, I propose to focus on one issue. As I have pointed out earlier, our challenge has not been arriving at solutions, but finding willingness to implement. The hard fact of the matter is that SAARC countries and Korea has been making rather incremental, slow improvement in terms of climate change responses and strategies. So how can we improve the cooperation between Korea and SAARC countries and also among SAARC countries by making the most of these available hard powers and soft power as presented earlier, all these innovative technologies and systems available. So I would like to ask our panel to give comments on how we can improve by utilizing the presented hard power and soft power to improve our cooperation. So, Dr. Kang and Dr. Lee.
Thank you very much. From my perspective, yes, what raised up the issues from the Professor Kim, that is very important, and then I think it was very crucial. But soft power and then hard power, yes, we have to consider both sides. I mean, learning best, learning by doing. From that's kind of the approach from GTC. We all the time think about it. I mean, we are not. I mean, compared to the knowledge things and then experiences, we are very similar because Korea, we also have just right going to the developed country, but last or 2 years ago, we are also the developing countries. So I mean, President Moon mentioned in the P4G, the Seoul Summit, that Korea is a bridging country to the coordinating and then to connect from the developing side to the developed countries. So the kind of the actions that we can do that because of based on our experiences and then understanding of what's going on in the developed country and also the developing countries. So kind of this common understanding, which is a very key potential that we can provide it to boost the soft and hard power from not just only the developing countries, but also our side.
Yeah, from my side, I think that I'd like to welcome the proposal of Mr. Aminul Islam Khan regarding the creating a SAARC South Korea Climate Fund, maybe more or less the SAARC South Korea Climate Cooperation Platform, including fund and some technology transfer facility, etc. And especially the establishment of SAARC South Korea Climate Change Data Bank, research center is the very much interesting options to be taken as a follow-up this year, Korea SAARC Forum. Through that cooperation platform, for example, the tools that I presented during my presentation was easily transferred because the Institute developed those tools with in-house capacity, and also these tools are ready to apply in different circumstances in many developing countries. So I think that this kind of South Korea and the SAARC decision making is quite important to think about.
Thank you. All these beautiful, fantastic tools and systems are available and have been available, but the fact is that, for example, India and Korea still remain in the top world 10 most carbon-emitting countries. So we are to really improve the situation. And now we want to open this panel to the floor, and particularly to participants from SAARC, and on this question: how can we improve our cooperation by maximizing the available technologies and systems? So we welcome questions and comments. Are we getting questions from Zoom? Okay.
Thank you very much for all comments and presentations made by distinguished guests today. My question goes to Dr. Lee. Actually, when I see your presentation, I was really impressed because that Korea's sophisticated technologies has gone to less developed countries. So I saw in your presentation that one of your projects that in Vietnam, IoT technology for water management and the green transportation for Bhutan. I just wanted to get kind of clarification from you. Compared to Korea, the SAARC countries, especially like Bhutan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and my country like Sri Lanka, when you're implementing such technologies, you have kind of difficulties. And also, once the project is implemented, there are problems in maintaining. I just wanted to know, hear from you, how you have addressed these issues and how you are going to address those issues in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nilanti Sorry. Yes, I'm very welcome because we also have another very good project, I mean not mentioned today, which is a Sri Lanka project we already ongoing. And my colleagues over there, she is in charge of the Sri Lanka project in terms of the climate change issues. We also provided some energy, solar panel and the solar energy system to the countries. Going back to your question, but Bhutan project and then Vietnam side, yes, we have a little difficulties to introduce from our technology itself, because very different environmental system in terms of the electricity, and also those two technologies based on the ICT, which means that ICT technology and then the network is very crucial. Korea is one of the best network system we have already, but based on this environment, we cannot expect, and then it is very awkward to expect kind of the speed and the network system in Bhutan and then Vietnam. So we adjusted our technology based on the environmental system in those two countries. Especially Bhutan project, we established the Wi-Fi centers following the pedestrian road. Korea, we have a network system is very widely and then very cross-sectorally. It is already highly functionated from the supported currently two different private sector ICT companies, and also the Ministry of Science and ICT very much focus and support, financial support to upgrading kind of the network system. But in Bhutan is very lack of the capacity and financial issues. So one of the SME in Korea, the company has the Wi-Fi lightning sensors, and then the status they have. So that we implemented, and then this lightning system is making the Wi-Fi zone. So the Wi-Fi zone is like a compensated network system to be provided. So based on this Wi-Fi network, Wi-Fi environment, that we can provide the ICT and then BIS system. So first we think we implement a very small size, but thankfully the World Bank and the Green Climate Fund, they supported a widely spread out to the nationwide, the kind of the Wi-Fi system and also the ITS-based system. So it's very useful. The BIS, Bus Information System, that is already Korea, Seoul Metropolitan City, that system is the same one. And the same company, they are going to there. So they adjusted the technology issues and then solve the problems, very technical things, and then finding the solutions, and then they are currently implementing. The Vietnam side, very similar situation, lack of the network system and then poor ICT system. So that's why we also think about making the ICT system, introduce the big private ICT company in Korea. So currently we are communicating with the Vietnam government side, because the ICT and then network issues is government to government have to solve. So probably after the communication with the government side, we can provide more official support in the Vietnam side. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the floor? Any final comments from the panels? Oh, there, yeah. We have one question.
Kim Jun, I have a question to Professor Kim. Thank you very much for the presentation. And it seems like a visioneering framework is very comprehensive. And I was thinking that it is very important to have this vision that should be widely accepted to the public. And I was wondering, who should set the vision? Should it be set by specific leaders, or should it be should it take more bottom to up approach, or should it be like top to the bottom approach?
Important question. Difficult answer. Actually, visioneering in terms of governance, in other words, vision casting has to be from top down, but it has to be with a handshake with the bottom up. And that's actually the important point, that I was looking into the SAARC homepage, and there were many kind of fragmented centers in terms of focusing energy, focusing this and that, but then was not able to find the whole communal vision of SAARC. So I think this is one of the things that we want to work together to have this very transparent and clear communal vision of SAARC that is convincing and unifying our cooperation and partnership in the future. Thank you very much. I think our time is up, so thank you very much.
Thank you for the discussion, and thanks for the moderating, Professor Kim. Now I'd like to close session 2, and we truly appreciate all the panelists for valuable contribution to today's seminar. So today we had a great opportunity to discuss this challenge and the responses and cooperation opportunity between ROK and SAARC. We believe there will be stronger cooperation between the Korea and SAARC, and we thank you again for your participation, and we wish you all the best. Thank you.